Assassi Business Roundtable is proud.
The time is 7:15. Hello and good evening. Welcome to Assassi Business Roundtable with me, Agyenkwa Budget. Tonight, we will be discussing the Agyenkwa Budget with our Finance Minister, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. Assassi Business Roundtable is brought to you by Electromart Big 3. 3 big rewards and treats and up to 60% for discount for 3 days at the new Electromart Premium Shop at Ahodru Roundabout. Good things come in threes. Electromart Big Deal offers on LG, Samsung, Sony, Broom, TCL, Philips, and many more home appliances. Ghana's #1 multi-brand electronic showroom has a new premium shop at Ahodru Roundabout, Sonar Center. Enjoy 3 big rewards for 3 days: free smartphones, free KFC meal vouchers, and free souvenirs on any appliance purchased. Exclusive to November only. Rush now or call WhatsApp to pre-order now on 0540 101 373. Electromart, your world of electronics. Offer valid while stocks last. Terms and conditions apply. Assassi Business Roundtable is also brought to you by Ghana Shippers Authority. Importers and exporters in Ghana pay huge sums of money in demurrage as a result of delays in clearing goods at the ports. The Ghana Shippers Authority wishes to remind importers and exporters that demurrage is an avoidable cost if they process their documents for clearing their goods at the ports long before the goods arrive. To avoid demurrage payment, shippers should plan their shipments before importation of goods, negotiate with shipping lines for extra free days at the time of placing their orders, monitor the arrival of shipping vessels at the ports, engage a credible clearing agent to process all declarations ahead of the arrival of goods at the ports, obtain all permits or exemptions where necessary before the arrival of goods at the ports, prepare for payments on imported goods ahead of arrival of goods, and promptly pay for all related charges of handling and transportation to take delivery of goods from the port. Importers and exporters are also encouraged to visit our offices at West Ridge, Accra, Ridge, Kumasi, Chapel Hill, Takrady, Gonbihini, Tamale, or at our shipper complaints and support units at the Aflao, Akanu, Paga, and Alubo borders, Takotel, Takrady Port, or Cargo Village KIA for assistance with your shipping challenges. Call us on 0303 9533 746 or toll free 0800 3000 555 0800 3000 555. Visit our website at www.shippers.org.ga. Ghana Shippers Authority, providing shipping solutions. Today, I would like for us to have a conversation that helps to increase understanding of our finance systems. Thank you and welcome to Assassi Business Roundtable. Today, I would like for us to have a conversation that helps to increase understanding of our finance systems, the pressures faced by our Minister for Finance and Economic Planning, and how the changes he is implementing at his ministry will allow us to reach a future state that creates equal opportunity for Ghana and Ghanaians as a leading African country on the global stage. Yesterday, Ghana's budget for 2022, titled the Agyenkwa Budget, was presented to our parliament. Agyenkwa means savior. This budget was designed to move Ghana into the next stage of its post-COVID recovery. It was a difficult budget because Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta had to find a way to serve 2 masters: the global financial marketplace, which we have relied on for raising capital to finance our development, and the needs of the Ghanaian people. Since September, global financial markets have dealt us a hard lesson on the challenges we face trying to navigate these 2 masters with competing interests. Outside funders with deep pockets have tried to send us a message that they will not continue to provide us funds unless we push our economy through austerity in order to prove that we have the ability to raise the funds and cut our costs, thus continuing to access global markets for refinancing of our existing debts. Ghanaian Eurobond US dollar debt yields prices blew out to between 11% and 12% across the board yesterday in the aftermath of the budget announcement. And as of this morning, our yield curves were inverted, meaning it's cheaper to borrow money in the long term than the short, usually a warning that we may be heading for recession. In doing so, outside funders have priced our debt as if we will default and fail to pay our obligations. Meanwhile, the Ghanaian man and woman on the street is being forced to pay the price of the speculations through a reduction in the quality of living as the cedi devalues and price inflation takes hold. Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, thank you for making the time for us to have a conversation about Ghana's economy.
Thank you very much, Kweku. It's really great to be here. I think yesterday was a watershed day for the country with regards to the direction that we want to go, and to really to be masters of our own destiny, and really pushing the agenda of a Ghana beyond aid, forward.
In the pursuit of that agenda of Ghana Beyond Aid, how do we reconcile the competing interests of our outside financiers and the people who must shoulder the burden of proving our growing maturity in a global financial marketplace, the Ghanaian people?
Well, quickly, I think it's, the story of Africa and of Ghana has been whether we have truly leveraged our resources in a way in which we will get the type of capital we need to move forward. And I deeply believe that we have that capacity to raise that type of resource in country. The world continues to be skeptical about Africa, and that's just a reality that we have to deal with. If I look at Africa in general of about 14 to 16% revenue to GDP, which comes to about $500 billion, and you look at the European countries at about 34. So imagine multiplying that by two or three, and you go 1.3 trillion of dollars to be able to move forward. And so for us in Ghana, when we talk about revenue to GDP of 12%, just imagine what will happen if we get to 20%. So the issue is really focusing on ensuring that we get the efficiencies that we require, and therefore have the resources to do what we want to do. Yesterday's reaction in the international capital markets was interesting, because truly a contraction of the level that we did from 12.1% to 7.4, which gives us a contraction of about 4 point something percent. It's really amazing, and that's austerity when you talk about it.
Absolutely. The expectation from foreign financiers is that the reason why the market sold off so hard yesterday was because you didn't mention going to the IMF for support in assuaging our debt situation.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think that becomes the problem, as to confronting whether we can be masters of our own destiny, and why do I need the IMF to tell me what to do. We came out of the IMF program very quickly when we came into power in 2017, and got that out. They remain, trusted advisors, but whether that instrument of being under the IMF is the only way for a country to grow, I beg to differ.
so you believe that we have the ability and the confidence to be able to bear a different path that does not require us to kowtow to our investors who are asking us to go to the IMF to get money to repay them so they can give us more money. You're saying we don't need to go to the IMF.
I'm not sure that that is the path for emancipating one's economy. When you look at what we have done over the past 4.5 years, and then of course COVID struck. But if those numbers that we came up with, we developed yesterday, were looked at thoroughly, it's an incredible policy orientation to say that we know exactly where we're going, we have the capacity to do it, and let's work together to get access to the markets in a way that is fair and equitable.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, you have expended a considerable amount of energy showing Ghanaian people and the world that we have the ability to raise capital through taxation and through formalization of tax and digitization of the economy. One of the key policies that you came out with was the e-levy yesterday that will charge 1% charge on all remittances and 1.75% charge on all remittances and mobile money transactions.
Yeah.
Um, Why is it that you focus so hard on shoring up revenue generation and ensuring that
Yeah.
we can prove that we can collect
You
taxes?
know, we're moving from something like 70 billion odd to for the first time crossing the 100 billion mark. And that's quite an achievement for us. I
In
mean, if
terms of revenue
in terms of
collection.
revenue, and then of course we also focus on expenditures to a degree that would ensure that we also manage that. And that's a totality of sort of austerity when you are looking at it. Now, if you look at our collection of revenue, for example, it is completely unbalanced, you know, where Greater Accra has about 88% of all of the revenue, and then Ashanti, Western, and Eastern together, barely 3%. Okay. Then there's a whole issue of an informal market, which the vice president has been really focused on in terms of digitalization to get everybody on board. Kweku, the whole world is shifting into an electronic gear, in which therefore the old tax handles, you know, may not be, you know, sort of the natural reversion that you want to. Now, if you look at the e-levy, you can see about maybe 2016, Momo transfers being about 78 billion over that time. Now we've gotten to a point where even this year we might cross the half a trillion mark, and next year we'll probably get to the trillion mark, and everybody uses that.
Yes.
So when we begin to talk about inclusiveness, etc., I mean this is clearly one way in which all of us will contribute to this junction in our life as a republic. And what the president is suggesting is that let's move into an entrepreneurial nation, a nation in which we give the enabling factors for people to be able to have access and capacity to do their own work, whilst really also strengthening the private sector to absorb because of the constraints in the public sector.
Does the e-levy in pursuit, does it not contradict your pursuit of entrepreneurship by creating an extra burden of cost on some of the poorest Ghanaians who are also the most entrepreneurial? You know, a typical trader might be working with 1,000 CDs, and based on the policies you've raised, if they're trying to churn that money as much as possible in order to generate enough income for themselves, each time they churn that 1,000 CDs per month, you're now going to charge them 1.7%. If they do that 10 times, they'll end up paying 175 CDs, which is effectively a 17.5% on their capital base.
No, I think
Does it
those
not hold back entrepreneurship?
no, those are interesting analysis, but I'm not sure that's how it works. I mean, what do we have? First, we exempted, of course, the first 100 CDs any day from that, and that's positive. Now you have this throng, Kweku, of an army of unemployed people, which really is one of our greatest crises that we have. And then we have a situation where living standards are also quite low.
Yes.
And because of the global pandemic and supply chains, etc., conditions are difficult. However, you need to tackle the issue of revenue to be able to support a thriving economy and to build forward for the future. The question is who pays for it? There were going to be taxes one way or the other. So you have the option maybe of petroleum, which is really the dynamic for petroleum we know in terms of its effects on the poor, etc. And then you have the issues of other things and the reality of where your economy is shifting to. So for the first time, I think this might be, you know, sort of historic and quite seismic. We have been able to put together for what we call the Entrepreneurial Nation, a youth start and private sector program that is Kweku 10 billion CDs. Through the levy, government is able to do about 1 billion CDs each year for 3 years.
Yes.
Through the agreements that we are having with some donors and international financial institutions, we'll get another 2 billion for this effort. in speaking with a partnership of the banks. We are getting a certain amount of their loans into this SME, which will be about 5 billion. So together, we've been able to put together a 10 billion package to support the youth towards entrepreneurship and being able to get the enablers of training, of capital, and skills and digitalization that is required. So the question, for all of us is, do we want our children home, or do we want to find a means for them to do what they can do best?
So
and that's what we are doing.
So the e-levy is designed to help to fund young people to go out and be entrepreneurs, take them outside of the home and be entrepreneurs, and help them to become sole entrepreneurs on the Ghanaian economy, as you mentioned a few weeks ago, that the government coffers are full and are empty, and there are no more jobs on the government payroll, and all young people must get out there and be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but you don't leave them out, and this is where the visible hand of the state comes in.
Yes.
To say, let us try and guide this, and to make sure that the enablers are available, to them to do that. But it's not only creating, mitigating the risk that they face, but giving them the tools to do that in a real direct way. And beyond that, also finding resources for existing private sector companies, so that they would be able, in a sense, to also expand and be able to employ more people, so that you have this regeneration going on, and a whole different spirit of saying, I'm not going to bury my talents, and through this means, you're going to get, those 1,000 people employing 1 or 2 people, as opposed to these huge firms always doing that. And the question then becomes, if I am then being taxed through this e-levy, that is my contribution to what we call a burden sharing towards this entrepreneurial nation, in which we are together as one people, forging ahead to create this dynamism and energy, which I believe represents what Ghana is.
I'd like to ask you a question about a bit more detail about the e-levy and the levying of charges. At the moment, some mobile telephony providers like Vodafone do not charge transaction charges. Others like MTN do charge transaction charges. Do you expect that over time that the private sector will be able to be part of sharing the burden by reducing their costs, which allows for it to be easier for normal people on the ground to be able to then pay these taxes to you by reducing those other costs that are going to the private sector?
I think private sector, in the end, always looks to expand the market and to be able to, contribute to society by hiring more people. And so it is our responsibility to find ways to support them. So, for example, in this 10 billion construct that we have for the youth, and looking at what the banks intend to do, it is my responsibility to find out whether I can give a first loss, I can give a guarantee. So in the same vein, I'm sure the telcos will look at, what is happening, the type of policy orientation that we have, and they will adjust accordingly to support this effort, because it really changes the spirit of the country, and once the pie expands, they also make more. I suspect we're going to have a much more interesting partnership with the private sector going forward.
In terms of taxes generally, and again, going back to this idea of widening the tax net to improve tax receipts and increase contributions from a wider base of Ghanaians, can you give us some numbers as to how the widening of tax net to date has affected Ghana's interest rates, and what levels of collection have you been able to achieve?
Yeah. As you know, we are embarrassingly low, at 12 to 13% of revenue to GDP, and that has to change. We launched the revenue assurance and compliance race product maybe in August sometime. The Vice President opened that for us, in which we are really combining the Ministry of Finance, GRA, and the security agencies to make sure we plug areas such as the minerals area, gold, for example, move into petroleum bunkering, which we have to do, the border controls, etc. So that is going to be able to squeeze, and I think we estimated that at least 500 million odd CDs will come through this year from that effort. We also, introduced the exemptions bill and the fees and charges bill into Parliament, and so we're going to get more. But I think one of the defining areas that we've not really tackled properly is property taxes.
Before you move to property taxes, I just want to focus a little bit again on the exemptions bill. The purpose of the exemptions bill is to remove exemptions that are being given to, currently being given to private sector companies in order to encourage them and incentivize them to invest in infrastructure development, etc.
I think it's really the abuse of the exemptions bill,
right?
I mean, it's natural that you give exemptions for certain things to happen so that you can then ensure that there are job openings, things are being created. The challenge really in the end is how that is used and applied. And also philosophically, if I give exemptions of, let's say, two CDs to you, can I begin to look at that as ensuring that your business, because the first 3 years of any business are really critical. Can I then at some point convert that into equity? Because really that's the money that I have. And I think that is then the next level of discussion. I've given you exemptions to make sure that you are able to operate and start, and that is income loss to me. And so what do I then define that as in future? And then, of course, there are issues of bringing in equipment and vehicles that people then sell afterwards, and that should come to the state. So it's all of those things that you are, but not to say that you are eliminating exemptions, but in terms of leakages and really philosophically understanding what it means so that I can recoup what I give to you at the beginning for survivability of the business.
As a percentage of GDP, what do you expect to gain back as a removal of these abuses of the expenses?
I think expenses was about 400 million or so expected for this year. And as we get better at it, I'm sure we'll get a lot more from that. Yeah. But so all in all, between the e-levy, the property taxes, the exemption bill, the fees and charges, and efficiencies such as the Ghana.gov program, which really is ensuring that MMDA's collections come directly, to GRA in a way in which receipts and paper do not work. And I think the pilot of 6 months from May to October gave us about 34 billion, straight into GRA. And the expectation is that by the end of December, I think we have some 40 odd signed up. By the end of December, we have 165 of these MMDAs in there. And we're going to see much more direct deposit of these resources and stop the leakages. And so those are some of the things that we're doing.
Ken, let's talk about inflation. Yeah. We have seen inflation around the world become a phenomenon. A lot of central bankers have talked about that they expect this inflation to be transitory because of base effects since the reopening post-COVID. The effect of that inflation on us is really harsh, as the cedi has experienced a devaluation of something like 10% since the beginning of the year, but really since September. How, in Ghana Beyond Aid period, where we are looking to raise capital and be self-sufficient in generating revenues that we can then use to build our country, how do we ensure that we are not being buffeted by inflation from outside, and how can we make sure that the spikes in inflation, if it is just transitory and not long-term, those spikes don't impact too much the value of our cedi?
Good question. I mean, we are all sort of linked to this global dynamic, however we cut it. If we look at oil, I'm not sure until the first quarter of next year there's going to be a letdown in that, and then hopefully it will go down. So that we are caught in this web, and then of course we are caught in global supply chains, which shipping freight and just a backup is going to affect us. The challenge really is on food,
Yes.
and whether the new policies we have or that we've been having since 2017 will result in our own capacity for food security and even exports. So those are the areas that we are. And if you look at the Ghana Cares Obatampa program, there are specific interventions for tomatoes, for poultry, for rice, etc., which then will reduce this $2 billion dollar importation of food, so that we can have our own food security, and that should blunt it. I think the work that we are doing in industrialization, 1D, 1F, is an important intervention. And with the AFCFTA here, Ghana really should be pushing towards being the regional hub for industrialization using the agri-base that we have. So those are, attempts at structurally changing our economy, and the issue of the entrepreneurial state nation is targeted at really emancipating ourselves from being traders into being manufacturers and feeling confident about it. So if there's a 1D, 1F factory in your district and you say you don't have a job because you have not looked at the value chain to say, oh, this is a potato, drying company. So now can I have that 1 patch or 1 acre to be able to supply it? It is that next level of thinking and realizing that there are opportunities. And we're saying that we will enable that with the You Start program, so that you have the training and you have the finances to be able to start your own small patch.
Do you expect the You Start program to be as successful as programs in Israel and Rwanda, for example, that have made people like Rwanda a startup hub? And how do we ensure that young Ghanaians have the right mindset to replicate that for you?
Yeah. No, I think Ghana phenomenally. I mean, Kweku, I believe in our manifest destiny of greatness, and I have no question that we can do it once we put our minds to it. Cocoa, the 1 acre farmer became world class. There's nothing we can do if there's dedication. And Kweku, a 10 billion policy orientation to do that is just unprecedented. The question now is efficiency on deploying it so that from the district level through to Accra, everybody has a means of assessing that. And here is where we are using NEIP and GEA with all of their distribution, and the two sort of policy anchor banks, CBG and GCB, so that it's really national. And they would have their own desk in each place to be able to support, give you training, help you with your feasibility studies, and then subsidized amounts are available for you to kickstart your business. I think it's going to be a very interesting time in our country as we see our youth energized to take this risk. And the risk, means that you lose some money, but that's business. But I think it is the way to go.
Ken, our global financiers have been asking questions of us. The question they've been asking is whether we are mature enough to access the Eurobond market the way that we have.
Don't you feel insulted when that is asked? I mean, the question, really is, well, are you ready for independence? Are you ready for... And we did that, and now we've gotten into investment and trade as the new line of challenge, and believe in our spiritual strength to be able to do that. And we are saying, if you look at this budget and the austerity that it brings, this is a nation of people committed to moving forward, And as they say in Twi, in Kwancha Adeyefe, the things on the street side or outside are nice. But yeah, this is kind and this kind of the bay, and I say, into a levy. Once we pay this levy, everybody is involved. You increase the sense of democratization, you increase a sense of dignity because I'm part of it. I think the whole thing should rather be, talk for jobs. Anytime you speak, you are tuning into, the whole concept of supporting your children to be able to get jobs. So let's talk for jobs and believe that this is the way to go forward.
Innovation, market liberalization, and local alternatives for revenue generation are critical. We've talked about many of them. We've talked about the e-levy. Um, are you ready to invest in, ready to revisit the idea of diaspora bonds, and how, in this new paradigm, do you expect to create relationships between Ghanaians in the diaspora and local Ghanaians? And if you do create a diaspora bond with this newfound confidence, could it be said that it's perhaps better to create an open-ended fund than to constantly go back to global markets to list bonds that would be targeted at diaspora? Are there ways in which we can use financial instruments to ensure that we are creating sticky money that's committed to our long-term equity?
I think we can. And we've been working on the whole issue of a Homeland Act, which is essentially saying these over 100 million Africans around the globe, how do you find a land, which really is Ghana, to come back to? For example, there are some 43 million African Americans, over $1 trillion in purchasing power. How do you create a system such as Israel, which we are now looking at a bill to encourage that? I think for the first time in the U.S.'s history, about 2-3 million African Americans are sort of retiring from the service. You assume $30,000, $40,000 of payment each year, and if you get that type of population coming in, not only with the capital is interesting, but the skill set that comes with it, is a whole change in our destiny. So we are confident that with the boldness of the president and the declaration of where we want to go with a Ghana Beyond Aid, we're going to attract resources beyond measure. And if we ourselves, grasp this excitement going forward, I think Kweku is limitless what we can do. I think the international capital markets will come around to realizing, that this is a bold and different country, ready to tax themselves, to be able to build their economy. The economy is going to expand, and they should be scrambling for our bonds at the right time.
The challenge to us is that it's difficult to find transparency in our financial planning, and it's difficult for people to monitor the performance of the funds that they provide to us. What is being done to improve transparency and to ensure that there is disclosure and reporting on the funds that are being given to Ghana and how they're being deployed?
It's interesting because we have moved from, there's a lot of talk about debt, and we moved from 123 billion CDs or so in 2017 to maybe 341 billion today, which puts us at 77.8% or so of GDP. Yes. And our target, was always to be under 70, and I think ECOWAS is about 65 or so. So what have we done with that? And you look at the stock of transactions that had been done, which then crystallized during our time, of about 6 billion. So that was inherited. Then you look at FinSip, which in terms of our intervention in the financial system, which is about 21 or 22 billion. And then we look at IPPs of about 18 billion. So that's kind of 40 billion that you really had no capacity to change anyway. And then if you look at that debt of stock and add what you call currency depreciation, that's another 48, okay? So right there is 88 billion, no fault of yours, but inherited. you take that out, and I guess you get about 200 and something billion of that. And you take away another 48 billion, and you have 130 billion for all of that we have done during this period. And truly, what we have done during this period of 130 billion is phenomenal, given also the issues that we had to deal with COVID. So that really, for me, is the reality in terms of the use of those resources, both in the flagship programs and in hard, fiscal infrastructure in roads and whatever that we have. And then really the rate of growth is quite different. I think the NDC started maybe with 9 billion and ratcheted up to 123 billion. But that comparison, just to put things in perspective and say that what have we used the 130 billion for? And I think really the raft of things that has happened these 5 years is incredible. But there's also, if you look at the solution that the G20 came up with during these crises, where they had the DSSI in a way to say that, look, the liquidity issues are real. Let's extend it to give you fiscal space for you to then be able to come back to normal solutions. We haven't done that.
Is it fair that developed markets were given the opportunity and the space, having increased their central bank balance sheets by a factor of up to 20 trillion, are now not under the same kind of pressure that we are under, even though our expansion was much lower? Why is it that we are being expected and held to a much different standard than Western institutions and regions which have massively increased their debt and are still giving helicopter money to their citizens?
Yeah, I think, Gregu, that's what happens when you grow up and you begin to see that even international policies are one of might and tribe, and you see the vaccine, the vaccine issues, and that all has
Yes.
brought a situation where Africa is about 4 or 5%, and on average out there about 60% for the Europeans, etc. And those are things you have to fight, but the fight is really in making sure that with things like digitalization, you're able to collect your own resources, you're able to sit at the table to negotiate these things, and really begin to change, the order in which. And Ghana has been really forceful about how to begin to reverse this. It's going to take a lot of work to do. But I believe that we can do it. But it's our own commitment, therefore, to understanding the use of our own taxes, and we all being part of enabling this to happen, And I think that's a transition that we are at, to say that we do want to be an entrepreneurial nation, and what does it take, burden sharing to be able to do that. And you see the uses of what we have done with our debt that we have collected. And truly it's phenomenal once you break down, as I have done for you now, to see then what we did with the 130 billion that we are talking about, in a rate of growth that is much more tolerable than we had experienced in past governments.
If you just tuned in, this is Asasi Business Roundtable, and tonight we are unpacking the 2022 Agyenkwa Budget. My guest tonight is the Finance Minister, and I am your host, Agyenkwa Budget.
Thank you. The issue of transparency, I think we've been one government that has consistently reported to Parliament with regards to our reports on the website. That is very clear. And our public debt report is always published. ESLA reports are published. Petroleum reports are published. Budget reports are published. So the issue of information asymmetry really doesn't come in. Anybody who truly wants to analyze this. Yesterday, I guess, was an example of where, interpretation of what we said, which was obvious, because people were so fixated on we coming up with a declaration that we are going to the IMF,
Correct.
that huge contraction in a year in which we have also moved our primary balance to positive, 3 years ahead of time. It's just incredible.
The people who were expecting you to go to the IMF, they are the people who are buying our bonds and financing us.
Yeah.
If they come to us and say, on pain of taking this money away, we need you to go to IMF.
Well, it's not.
What right do we have to tell them, no, we
Yeah.
shall not?
Well, you shall not, because now you have your e-levy and certain efficiencies that are saying, okay, I'm going to domestically finance. Do I need to now look at my debt portfolio and see whether I can restructure it? And that's a liability management that we have to be really aggressive on to give us space for that. If I'm able to contain my wages and interest charges, that changes the dynamic of my fiscal needs immediately, which enables me to build forward and get the youth employed. And that completely changes the dynamic.
Until now, Ghanaian youth, the only time in which they see the outside world is when they desire to travel and to live and work outside Ghana. Obviously, this is something that's very important to reverse, because we need to reverse the brain drain and ensure that our young are contributing in Ghana. What can we do to change their mindset so that they see Ghana as a region within which they can grow and build and grow roots and then fly, even if it's just to travel, to visit, rather than to take their skills and knowledge and hard work somewhere else? What is the change that's required to keep Ghanaian kids here?
I think the excitement is coming, and really this 10 billion move will change that sense, because really sitting in your bedroom in Chebi or Akwadum, I have to find a way to get technology right to you.
Yes.
And that's a whole push about digitization, the ability for you to get on YouTube, the ability for you to learn new things, my responsibility to make sure that you are connected. And this is where the visible hand of the state comes in, finding financial resources at rates that are much better than we are having right now. The president had a meeting in October of all the bankers to look at the stickiness of interest rate and what we can do. And that has resulted in this 5 billion facility that we are going to work with the banks to make sure that becomes available to private sector to do. And so Ghana should become that regional hub, that destination of plug and play. And that is where we are at.
Ken, in the 90s, you were building your empire. You were building Data Bank, Enterprise, Insurance, and others. You came from a background of masters an MBA at Yale, after a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Columbia. And then you worked at Morgan Stanley, you worked at Salomon Brothers, and you came to Ghana, and then you built a bunch of financial institutions and systems that replicate, to some extent, the global systems. As a leader to us and as a guide to the young people who you've said to go and enter the finance marketplace, in the 90s, when you were building your companies and Ghana was going through these adjustment programs and pressures from outside institutions like the World Bank and IMF and the other Bretton Woods institutions, what did the elders tell you as to how to continue to build? And what will you tell us, the young ones who have to convince our brothers and sisters sitting at trading desks around the world that they shouldn't be selling Ghana bonds, but actually that there are things being done that mean that down 12% is time to buy some Ghana bonds?
I think, Ghana is the place to go. I know we took quite a bit of a hit from family when we decided to come. This is Kelly and Togwa Fede and all of those who start an investment bank in Cantonment. I mean, who would have heard about it? And manage at some point to borrow $25,000, thanks to Afari Donko and Fred Owari. And we got a lot of helping hands, First 2-3 years were difficult, but 25 years later, this is where we are with the capacity to help the nation more. But entrepreneurship is full of risk. and I understand that. And that is why, for me, this 10 billion CD intervention is critical.
I want to hold your feet to the fire a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the detail of how, because this 10 billion cities is critical, and the e-levy is central to being able to power it. How is it going to work? How are we going to actually take money from individuals doing transactions, and where are the protections for poor people in that?
Well, the issue, of poor people is a very fundamental issue for us, because the issue of social mobility is crucial to a sense of dignity and feeling like you're a citizen. And so if you look at the first 4 or 5 years, and we're a center-right party, but you almost think that, you are a socialist party in the sense of how we have moved towards LEAP programs, school feeding programs, going senior high school, and then bringing businesses to the villages. So it is key that we are driving at a human capital, which we believe, is really, the solution to where we want to go. A confident people just bring prosperity, and that's important. And now we have done that for 4 and some years, and saying that how do we now get you into a state in which you are confident enough to now take that risk? And we are saying, let's start the You Start program, okay, in which we can bring people. But we even tested it, in a sense, with the Vice President's encouragement of the NAPCO program, which took 100,000 people, never just been done in the country before, to give them a hand, and for 3 years, make sure that at least they have some income, and then learn certain skills. So that's a government that is clear on the human capacity, and in eliminating poverty. And so then this is a continuum of saying this is what we have to do. And when you look at the financial superstructure or architecture, I mean, we came and met, a situation where it was quite clear that the banks were going to implode. And who was to bail them out, or who was to take that hard decision. And we decided to do that with 21 billion. And you can see a much stronger infrastructure as we speak. Last Friday, as I mentioned in Parliament, the governor gave us our license for the development bank. And that is going to be a real change in how the country now has access to long-term capital, because it becomes a wholesale bank, hopefully beyond $1 billion and change that we're starting with 800 million. And if you look at the trajectory of a KfW in Germany post-war, it is that type of institution that brings in capital, feeds the financial system so that they can work.
Where will that capital come from?
And that will be an ability. So it's not only now the sovereign going out, to raise money, but you're going to have companies with balance sheets, such as the development bank, that also go out to raise money. And that diversifies that portfolio.
Now, remember, we started this conversation on the rock and the hard place, the two masters, difficult to serve both. The new Ghana Development Bank will be raising capital locally,
but numbers don't lie. I mean, you can try as much as possible, but when you begin to see, deficits going down a certain level, when you begin to see your primary balance being positive, when you begin to see growth moving beyond 5, 6, 7%, after a point you have to concede that these guys know what they are doing and they intend to follow that. And that's what the Asians did. So it's not a new story. And I think any country in Africa that can do that will be us. And we are committed to that.
This is, to us, it was a difficult budget. And I've explained it as, the difficulty of meeting two masters with two competing aims. If you were required to send one message to both local Ghanaians and international financiers, such that it's no longer two masters that are being competing interests, what message would you send, especially to outside financiers?
I think, I can't over-focus on outside financiers without focusing first on Ghanaians, because I believe the solution is here. And the solution is here if our numbers are right. Okay, and our numbers will be right if we generate our revenues in a way and apply them, and also ensure that we manage our expenditure controls. I think the international system, be as it may, in the end has to look at the integrity of those numbers. And those will come through.
Okay.
It might be resistant, like when you are going for independence, there is resistance. In the end, by Nkrumah leading that in 57, a spate of independent countries in 1960. In the same way in which we are going to lead this economic emancipation, trade and investment, in which we are raising our own domestic resources, getting confident about everybody paying into it, and that would also change that.
So I'm going to put your foot to the fire
Yep.
one last time. What you're saying is really, really inspiring, but the detail is key. We have one chance today, which is to focus again on the e-levy. How will it work?
The e-levy, Kweku, I mean, given where we are and an ability to collect revenue, seems like the most effective way. The systems are there. We know where everybody is. We know when you click what will happen. Deductions, can be done immediately. And so even the issue of leakages, where therefore usually when we talk about new taxes, the cynicism as well, how will people comply? There's nothing that we have to worry about that. We know exactly how it will be charged because it's taken off and it's already being done. The telcos do it anyway. So enhancing of that platform makes sure. I think we could have gotten, I mean, we're pretty conservative about this because we're working, instead of a figure of $1 trillion, we're actually working with a figure of about 460 billion.
As the total revenues that would have the tax applied to them.
That, so there's a huge give there for efficiencies. And we are very confident about that. But I think that the issue of all of us being a part of it is important, and recognizing also the issue of the poorer people in our community and eliminating 100 is also important.
To be clear, you're saying that you expect to raise about 6 billion cedis a year.
At the
from
very
the
least.
400
I
odd
think for
billion.
this we have about 6.9 billion in this in this measure that we expect.
And you believe that's conservative?
I
in
think
terms
so.
of the actual
I think we've
activities?
really done that. But the thing though, Kweku, is the issue of talk for jobs. For the first time, I'm going to be really part of the contribution and to eliminate the sense that a few people are paying. So this is across the board, and it brings a certain inclusiveness. And there's really pride in being able to be part, of a new agenda that is going to bring jobs and cut out this indignity of people who are educated and still staying at home.
In 2018, Uganda tried to implement its typical
Yeah.
e-levy. In the end, because of political pressure, the leadership ended up reversing the position and reducing the charge down to 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
How will we avoid that, and how will you make sure that Ghanaians will accept and embrace this new tax?
Yeah, I think, the challenge in all of these things is that, we kind of have waited for about 6 years to make this just a part of our DNA. And truly, we have also seen clearly the issue of unemployment and what is happening to our children at home and what we want to happen. And we are pretty fair-minded people, okay? So we know that there's a need for more resources for the state. We also know the inequity of distribution. And so we are bringing something for the first time, ropes everybody in and to be part of it. Clearly targeted at making sure that we have our roads, making sure that the Youth Start program, takes on with some VIV and VEVA. And it will be a different discussion, talk for jobs. will be, a key issue of saying, hey. So if I speak a little, I'm able to eliminate, this idea of unemployment. How do I then extend that to the school curriculum so that the issue of entrepreneurship become part of our DNA? And there's humility in whatever job that we take, as we know that it will grow, because the state is there to enable finance and to enable skills training and to ensure that digitalization, helps you in your quest to grow. So I don't think there will be a reversal. I think people will come around to understanding this shared burden, which is really important.
Ken, it has been remarkable to spend time with you today. It is very rare for a leader in your position to speak candidly about the types of issues that go to the character and the psyche of the people of a nation. And it is remarkable that in your discussion and implementation of policy, you are going beyond pure numbers and thinking about the anthropological state of the country. What would you say to those around the world who've just come from COP26, who've effectively said the global South needs to stand up now, stand up together to say to the developed world and to the West that we have a voice, and that unless we are equal partners, we cannot be able to contribute to resolving the climate crisis that we face as a global society?
Mm-hmm.
That is a very confident thing for developing nations to do. One of the things we've learned this year was that when we went to raise bonds in the Eurobond market back in February, March of this year, when we went to the market, we ended up allowing our bonds to be priced about 1 or 2% away from where existing bonds were. And as a result, we've seen what happened in the last month or so, where, led by certain investment banks, etc., we've had what's effectively a drive-by because they understood that there were structural failings in the way in which we'd raised this capital. I believe that it's functionally, potentially because we didn't have the confidence to believe that we deserved to go and raise that capital, and so we showed some desperation and increased the price that we're willing to issue at. Mm-hmm. How do we ensure that our teams, our people, our finance workers understand that we are equal players and are able to sit at the table with these financiers and ensure that we are seen to be professional and diligent and have the focus to ensure that we're doing things the right way with transparency?
Mm-hmm. Kweku, I mean, that is assuming that the international markets are fair to Africa or emerging markets. If I look at Greece, which maybe went to the market at 2%, and then I went at 8 or 9, it's an issue of geography. Okay.
Geography or geography and race.
Right. And so I say, so if you look at what the African finance ministers have done this past 20 months, is to say that what is this African premium that we are being charged, and therefore can we create what we call the liquidity support facility, which will then, in a sense, mitigate this risk. Or can you create what you call the African Stability Mechanism, which then creates the safety of that geography to be able to price properly? And I think those are things that we must work on, as we have some demonstration countries that clearly exhibit the capacity to do that. But the international capital markets always takes advantage of issues. I mean, you can see what happened in Brazil or whatever. But then the IMF comes in differently, in a way in which they give the Keynesian, intervention, which gives you resources to be able to go through the barrier for now and then set your stage going. And I think that's what we should be doing. We as a group, being very clear on the resource envelope that we have and creating these instruments and to make sure that the market, responds in a way that we want.
We have 3 minutes left, Honorable Ken. One of the challenges, of course, going forward now is that We have to bring people to the table who historically have not always had our interests at heart. When we sit at the table with these old institutions with whom we'd made colonial era agreements, what is the conversation we have today to ensure that they recognize that a new deal is necessary, a new relationship is necessary, and that we have the confidence to stand and defend for that?
Yeah, I think Kweku, your president has exhibited that to a degree that makes some people uncomfortable, but he passionately believes in our capacity as Ghana to do it. Ghana is an idea, it's not just a geography, and it's the idea of political emancipation. Of AFCFTA is an idea of economic and trade emancipation. And then, if I may add, our cathedral is an idea of spiritual emancipation. And so, with those three legs, situated in this place, with these 30 million people, as I mentioned in Parliament, we are not chickens, we are eagles. And we just need to be bold to say it is time to fly. And the intervention of the U Start program and the 10 billion program is saying, guys, let's wake up to crossing the Jordan. And these are the tools that will help us to do it. The only thing we are afraid of is the fear of the unknown. And we need to eclipse that, and say, yes, let's talk for jobs.
A new age has begun. You have been listening to Ken Ofori-Atta, Honorable Minister for Finance and Economic Planning for the Republic of Ghana. It has been my pleasure, and I hope that you will continue to lead us with confidence and with pride so that we can see who we can become in the future.
Amen.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Kweku. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Great.